How much money do you need to retire? Well, if you're hoping to live on $100,000 a year in retirement, the answer is roughly $2.5 million in investments. While that is a correct answer, it doesn't do you much good if I don't explain how I came to that conclusion. And that's where the Trinity study comes in. I'm Bradford with the Penny Pincher's Guide, and I'm going to help you understand how you can figure out how much money you need to retire comfortably, as well as how the Trinity study is going to help you get there. But before I do that, I'm going to ask you to give the video a like. So let's get into it. So what is the Trinity study? The Trinity study, also known as the 4% rule, are both informal names given to a paper published by 3 finance professors at Trinity University at the end of the 1990s. The paper sought to answer the question of how much money can I safely withdraw in retirement. Really, it is a fine balancing act. If you withdraw too much money, then you're risking running out of your investments and not having any money at the end of your retirement period. The other thing that they're trying to balance is not withdrawing so little that you are needlessly lowering your standard of living. So how was the Trinity study conducted? The Trinity study looked at 2 sets of historical data for both bond and the average stock market returns from the time period of 1926 to 1995, as well as 1946 to 1995. The earlier period includes the very significant negative returns generated during the Great Depression, and then the second period serves as a control variable, looking at what are the average stock market returns outside of the Great Depression. Now, using those historical returns, they analyze several things. The first is what is the percent that you can withdraw each year? And those percentage ranges from 3% at the lowest end all the way up to 12%, and each percentage point in between. Now, for each of those withdrawal rates for the different time periods of historical data, they looked at different payout periods, or how long you plan to withdraw that percent interest rate throughout your retirement. And they used 4 ranges, and the payout periods were 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, and 30 years. And at the time, at the 1990s, those represented the most common life expectancies for retirees once they retired with needing to withdraw from their investments. And the last element that they investigated was what was the breakdown in the investment type. On one end, they investigated a 100% stock portfolio seeking to match the S&P 500, and the other end, they sought to investigate a 100% bond portfolio using US Treasury bonds. And then they found a mix in between ranging from 75-25, 50-50, and then 75-25 on the other direction. So what were the results of the study? The study generated 4 sets of tables. The first 2 that you can see right here. The table on your left represents the data from 1926 to 1995, and the table on your right is 1946 to 1995. Now, in both tables, they represent the portfolio success rate. And that simply means that out of 100, how many times did that specific portfolio was it able to sustain that withdrawal rate to the end of the payout period? Now, some general trends to be aware of when you're looking at these 2 tables. As you can see, stocks generally outperform bonds, especially when you're looking at the very low fixed income that can be expected from a US Treasury bond. So if you were given the choice between all stocks or all bonds, it would be a wiser decision to choose stocks based on their higher level of return, even though you are accepting a larger percentage of risk. However, when you look at the success rate of the different portfolios, you can see just by adding a little bit of bonds as a fixed income to help balance out those years when the stock market underperforms, it generates a much higher success rate for your portfolio overall. And then across both charts, you can see really 6% is the line where the success rate starts to plummet. Now, in the 1926 through 1995, with the inclusion of the Great Depression data, you can see that those success rates start to fall a lot faster as compared to those post-war years. And with those higher withdrawal rates, it is the bond-heavy investment portfolios that begin to fail sooner, simply because the returns from those bonds are not able to keep up with those higher withdrawal rates. And these stock-heavy portfolios last longer, including those longer payout periods all the way up to the 30-year mark. Now, while both of these tables with the various historical returns give us very important and valuable information, they don't include one factor that is crucial when looking at retirement data. And that is going to be the impact of inflation on your retirement returns and how it eats up your spending power. Third table that we're looking at right here uses an inflation rate on average and the annual rate of 3%. And it gives us a much better idea of what the various withdrawal rates will have an impact on your retirement and portfolio success. The first thing to consider when looking at this table is how significant of an impact inflation has on your portfolio success rate. You can see on the right-hand side of the table how the success rates begin to drop significantly, especially the bottom right and those bond-heavy portfolios over a longer payout period, their success rates drop to zero very quickly. And then looking at this table, you can see that 5% is roughly the magic number, where anything less than 5% has a significantly higher success percentage than those that have withdrawal rates of greater than 5% when inflation is included. However, if you are looking at a shorter time horizon of the payout periods of 15 years or less, you can get away with a 6 or even 7% withdrawal rate and still have a relatively high portfolio success rate. Now, the fourth and final chart to consider when looking at your success rate is going to be what is the terminal value of your portfolio. In other words, how much money is actually left in the account at the end of your 15, 20, 25, or 30-year time horizon. Now, the initial investment value used for this specific chart was going to be $1,000 prior to reaching that retirement age and those various payout periods. So if you were trying to use a number like you had an initial nest egg of $1 million, simply multiply any of these terminal values by 1,000 to get what the actual terminal value would be for your specific account. And it varies for any number. Just see what the rate is between the $1,000 used in this chart versus whatever nest egg that you were trying to get is. Now I'm going to focus on the left side of the chart here, which has the 75% stock, 25% bond breakdown, which out of all of the compositions of various stock and bond percentages has the best portfolio success rate of them all. Now looking at the highest withdrawal rate that they utilize for this chart, which is 7%, you can see that even on the 30-year time horizon, on average, you would have double the amount of your initial investment left to leave to your heirs. However, in the worst case scenario, using that historical data, there's also the possibility that you run out of money before the end of that payout period, and you have nothing to live out the final days of your retirement, as well as nothing to pass on to your heirs. Now, the magic number here, which is where the 4% rule comes from, is that you can see that in the 4% period, not only do you have a significant larger amount to pass on to your heirs at the end of a 30-year time horizon, you also, that minimum in the worst case scenario, you still are going to have money left over. And that is the cutting point. At 3%, you're going to have significantly more left over, and 4% is the highest amount withdrawal rate that you can maintain. Well, even in those worst case scenarios, you will not run out of money before the end of your payout period. So what are the key takeaways when looking at the Trinity study, and how can you apply them to your retirement plans? The first one that you need to consider is that you need diversity in retirement. While on average, the stock market is going to vastly outperform fixed income investments like bonds, you need to consider that, again, that is an average. And there are going to be years where stock market is going to vastly underperform. And we've seen that in the past 20 years with the Great Recession of 2008, and even with the coronavirus, which can be considered a black swan event, which caused the economy to tank. So if you were looking to retire during either of those periods, you're going to need fixed income to help weather the storm until your investments in the stock market return to the average. The next takeaway is going to be that 4% number, which gives rise to the 4% rule. That given the 30-year time horizon, if you withdraw only 4% of your net investments, you are going to have almost a 100% surety that that income from your investment is going to last you the entirety of your retirement period, all the way through a 30-year time horizon. Now, with that said, a 4% withdrawal rate is very conservative, and you can get away with even 5, 6, even 7% withdrawal and still have a pretty good chance that it is going to last you all the way through that 30-year time horizon. And if you're not looking for those longer payout dates of 30 years, if you're looking at 15 years or shorter, you can even get up to the 8 or 9% withdrawal rate, and your portfolio success rate is still going to be relatively high. Now, with those key takeaways in mind, what could be better improved on now that we are more than 20 years after the initial Trinity study? How have things changed? So the first thing I want to address is that this study only dealt with stocks that match the S&P 500 as well as US Treasury bonds. There are a variety of other investments that you can use out there. In particular, real estate is one of the most popular alternatives. Now, the results from the study do not necessarily convey in a 1-to-1 ratio to those other sorts of investments. Now, it's completely understandable. They had to constrain their study by something. They chose a very simple thing that is the most common form of investments for most Americans, which is going to be stocks and bonds. Now, if you are diversified into other investment portfolios, that is something to consider for a future study. It would be very interesting to include a variety of other assets into the mix and see how that does affect your portfolio success rate. The other thing that was not nearly as common at the end of the 20th century as it is now is the growth of the FIRE community and those of you that are trying to retire early. Now, this study focused with its longest payout period being 30 years, which, if you're retiring at 65, is a pretty good standard to go by. Now, if you are planning on retiring at an earlier age than what was used on average for the study, you're going to need to do a couple things. The first thing that you'll need to consider is that if you just plan on stopping working and just withdrawing from your investments, you're gonna likely need a much lower percentage rate, probably in the 2 to 3%, depending on how early you retire. So that way you have still a very high portfolio success rate. The other thing that you can do as an either or you can do both, is have some sort of active income or some other sort of investment that is continuing to generate you revenue. So that way you're not having to make withdrawals from your nest egg. And now for some closing thoughts. As with anything that is used to help you out with your personal finances, you need to remember that it is you, the person, that is the most significant element here. While this study gives us great information that can help you plan, you need to understand that it's not a one-size-fits-all. Now, depending on your plans for retirement, you can either do a higher or a lower withdrawal rate. And depending on how early you're planning on retiring, as well as how much money you want to leave to your heirs, if any, are all significant factors that are going to affect what is the proper withdrawal rate for you, as well as how large of a nest egg you need to have. But the 4% rate gives us a good place to start with. And if you have nowhere else to begin, 4%, so multiply whatever your annual expenses are by 25, and that's gonna give you a good goal to aim for how much money you need to be able to retire and live successfully, at least for a retirement period of 30 years. And that about wraps it up with trying to figure out how much money you need to retire, as well as how the Trinity study gives us valuable information to figure out that number. If you got any value out of this video, please give it a like. I wanna thank you for joining and watching this video today, and until next time, just remember to pinch a little. Thanks for watching, and if you liked this video, make sure to check out the video that's on the left-hand side of your screen.
Don't forget to subscribe if you'd like more great content, and to support our channel.